Hello. Today we're going to talk about crediting out a transaction. So in the instance where you have maybe overcharged a customer or you need to credit back some of the money back onto the customer's credit card, today we're going to show you how you can do that inside of PayflowPro. So upon logging into PayflowPro, you will first want to go find the original transaction that you want to credit back to the customer. And to do that, you would hit the Reports button, and then you would go to the Daily Activity Report. And inside here, you can go ahead under the Daily Activity Report and search for the day of that transaction to match it up. So I'm going to select the date here and hit Run Report. And it's going to give me all the transactions of that day. Here I can go ahead and select the transaction that I'm going to credit back to the customer. When crediting a transaction, you can only credit back a delayed capture transaction. Those are the only transactions that you can ultimately credit back to the customer. The authorization is simply a hold on the card. And when a card is authorized and then captured, you would only be able to then give back the capture of the funds. So a common error that occurs when crediting is trying to credit a transaction that is an authorization. But it does not work. You can only credit delayed captures. So once you go ahead and find the transaction that you're going to credit, you can go ahead and click on the transaction and load up the information here. You can double check that the invoice number here is the same as the invoice number you have in SuccessWare for the transaction. And then you go ahead and you copy the transaction ID. You can just right click on it and copy. So you have the whole transaction ID highlighted and copied for the delayed capture, and now we're going to go in and credit it. You go up to the virtual terminal, you select single transaction, and it brings up a section here where you can go through and finalize the credit. So first off, you have your tender type of credit card. You leave that alone. The next one would be the transaction type. This is where you would go through and select. For this instance, we are going to go to credit. And you'll notice that credit gives you the option with original transaction ID. You can go ahead and post in the transaction ID from the original. I just pasted it right there. So now we have the transaction ID for the original transaction. I click submit and it'll bring up a screen here where I can go ahead and change some of the information that I'm crediting back. So for example, it comes up with a full amount of $1. I can go ahead and credit any amount up to the full amount. So for example, if you happen to overcharge a customer and you want to give them back only partial amount of the money, you can change this to be any amount less than the full amount here. And that's how much you are ultimately giving back to the customer. So for example, if you had a $100 transaction and you needed to give 50 back, you would put 50 inside here so that you're returning 50, so ultimately you've collected 50 from the customer. Right here, I'm going to credit the full transaction for $1. So I leave it here as $1 and I hit submit. And it's now going to bring up a screen here showing that I'm submitting the credit, and it brings up a screen here now that's showing that I have approved the transaction. So this shows that the credit has gone through. You can print this page out for your details, even email it off to the customer if you need to. But that's how you know that you've done a credit and it successfully has gone through. And that is how you credit a transaction using SW Remote.